Step inside television's most psychedelic nightmare, where talking hats ruled. Charles Nelson Reilly suffered in green makeup, and a teenage Eddie Munster got trapped forever. From marijuana slang hidden in the title to Hollywood midget troupes and Marilyn Manson samples, Lidsville remains the strangest children's show ever created, and these bizarre behind-the-scenes secrets prove it. Fact 1. Charles Nelson Reilly was tricked into his costume. Charles Nelson Reilly, the beloved stage actor and Match Game panelist, signed on to play the villainous magician Horatio J. Hoodoo, thinking he'd only need to wear light makeup for the role. The producers assured him it would be a simple job, but once he was locked into his contract, the reality turned out to be dramatically different. Instead of the promised light makeup, Reilly found himself subjected to an elaborate torture device of a costume that made every day on set absolutely miserable. The outfit consisted of 3 layers of wool stacked on top of each other, which trapped heat and made breathing difficult in the studio lights. On top of that, his entire face had to be covered in thick green makeup that sealed his pores completely, creating what Reilly himself described as feeling like a wax mask that got progressively hotter as the day wore on. He later recalled that the costume was like a torture device, with the headpiece being particularly unbearable because of how hot it got and how the itchy hair felt against his skin. Reilly joked that if the costume came in white instead of green, he could have played the Phantom of the Opera, but there was genuine suffering behind the humor. By the time he realized what he'd gotten himself into, it was too late to back out, and he had to endure the physical discomfort for the entire production run. Fact 2. Reilly called it Sid and Marty's Polish Prison. While Charles Nelson Reilly delivered an energetic and memorable performance as Hoodoo that became iconic to children watching the show, behind the scenes he was deeply unhappy with the entire experience. Reilly openly stated that he hated every single day he went to work on Lidsville, calling it Sid and Marty's Polish Prison, in reference to producers Sid and Marty Krofft. The physical discomfort of the costume combined with the grueling production schedule made the job nearly unbearable for him. Once the cameras started rolling and he got into character, Reilly was clearly having a blast hamming it up as the flamboyant evil magician, delivering his lines with theatrical flair and comic timing. But the moment the director called cut, the misery returned. His experience was so negative that when the Krofft brothers wanted to bring the character of Hoodoo back for future productions, including live stage shows at the Hollywood Bowl and appearances in other Krofft television specials, Reilly flat out refused to reprise the role. From that point forward, actor Paul Gale took over playing Hoodoo in all subsequent appearances, wearing the costume and makeup that Reilly had grown to despise so much that he wanted nothing more to do with the character ever again. Fact 3. Billy Barty was originally cast as Weenie. Before Billy Hayes became the beloved Weenie the Genie, another actor was originally hired to bring the bumbling magical character to life. Billy Barty, one of Hollywood's most famous and successful little person actors with credits ranging from fantasy films to dramatic roles, was the first choice to play Weenie. The producers wanted Barty's recognizable face and proven comedic skills to anchor the character who would serve as Mark's main companion and helper throughout the series. Barty had built a remarkable career appearing in everything from Willow to He-Man and was known for his professionalism and ability to handle physical comedy with ease. However, before production could begin, Barty fell ill and had to withdraw from the project entirely, leaving the producers scrambling to find a replacement on short notice. Fortunately for the show, Billy Hayes was available and already had a strong working relationship with Sid and Marty Krofft from playing Witchy Poo on their previous hit HR Pufnstuf. Hayes stepped into the role and made Weenie her own, playing the genie as an androgynous character whose nervous energy and malfunctioning magic spells became one of the show's most endearing qualities. While we'll never know what Billy Barty's version of Weenie would have been like, Hayes brought her unique voice and physicality to create a character that became inseparable from the Lidsville experience. Fact 4. The title was 1970s drug slang. Like the Krofft brothers' previous show, HR Pufnstuf, Lidsville's title and overall vibe led many adult viewers to suspect hidden drug references throughout the production. The word lid had a perfectly innocent meaning as slang for any kind of hat or cap, as in the phrase, flip your lid, which made sense given that the show took place in a land of living hats. However, by the early 1970s, when the show premiered, the word lid had taken on an entirely different meaning in counterculture circles as common slang for a specific quantity of marijuana, typically an ounce or the amount that would fill a jar lid. This double meaning wasn't lost on older viewers who tuned in with their kids and immediately picked up on the implication. Combined with the show's intensely psychedelic visual style, bizarre premise of a boy trapped in a dimension of talking hats and swirling colors that seemed designed to look like a hallucinogenic experience, many people became convinced the Crofts were intentionally winking at adult audiences. The producers always maintained the show was pure children's entertainment with no drug references intended. But the timing of the slang and the show's overall aesthetic made it impossible for many viewers to see it as pure coincidence, cementing Lidsville's reputation as one of the trippiest programs ever broadcast on Saturday morning television. Fact 5. Filmed at breakneck speed. The production of Lidsville operated on an incredibly compressed and exhausting schedule that left cast and crew scrambling to keep up. All 17 episodes of the show's single season were filmed in just 11 weeks, which sounds barely possible when you consider the elaborate costumes, sets, puppetry, and musical numbers involved in each episode. To achieve this seemingly impossible timeline, the producers had to completely rethink how television production normally worked. Instead of filming episodes in sequence from beginning to end, they wrote scripts for every single episode in advance and then organized the shooting schedule around locations rather than storylines. This meant that the actors would show up at, say, Hoodoo's hat-shaped home and film every single scene from every single episode that took place in that location all at once, regardless of which episode it belonged to or what had supposedly happened earlier in the story. Then they would move to the next location and repeat the process, shooting all scenes that took place there across all episodes before moving on again. While this approach saved time by minimizing set changes and costume swaps, it created enormous challenges for the actors who had to keep track of where their characters were emotionally in multiple different storylines happening simultaneously. The breakneck pace contributed to the stressed, exhausted atmosphere on a set that made the experience particularly difficult for Charles Nelson Reilly in his suffocating costume. Fact 6. Mark never escapes. Lidsville. Most children's shows from this era followed a predictable formula where the protagonist facing adversity would ultimately triumph and return home safely. By the series finale, giving young viewers the satisfaction of seeing loose ends tied up neatly. Lidsville completely abandoned this convention in favor of something far stranger and more unsettling. Throughout all 17 episodes, teenage Mark desperately tries to find a way out of the bizarre hat dimension and return to the real world, with the evil hoodoo actively working to prevent his escape at every turn. Each episode would typically involve another failed escape attempt, or another scheme that Mark hoped would finally get him home. When the series reached its final episode titled Mommy Hoodoo, instead of providing closure to Mark's journey, the show took a completely different direction by having Hoodoo's mother arrive for a visit to check on her son and make sure he's still being properly evil. The episode consists mostly of flashback clips from previous episodes as the Good Hat citizens try to convince Mommy Hoodoo that her son is indeed still a villain. When the episode and series end, Mark is still trapped in Lidsville with absolutely no resolution to his predicament and no indication that he will ever find his way home. The decision to leave the main character permanently stuck in an alternate dimension with no hope of escape remains one of the darkest and most unusual endings in Saturday morning television history. Fact 7. The show featured Wizard of Oz munchkins. Given the enormous number of costumed hat characters populating the world of Lidsville, the production needed a small army of performers who could fit inside the various outfit designs and bring these living hats to life. While some characters were played by regular-sized actors when they were the focus of a scene, the sheer volume of background characters and crowd scenes required the producers to bring in specialized talent. They turned to a legendary troupe of performers who had already made their mark on Hollywood history decades earlier. Approximately 20 members of the Hermines Midgets, a group of little people performers who had traveled from Vienna to New York for the 1939 World's Fair and never went back, were recruited to play the various hat inhabitants of Lidsville. Many of these same performers had appeared in the iconic 1939 film The Wizard of Oz, playing Munchkins in the beloved musical fantasy. By the time Lidsville came around in 1971, the Herman's Midgets had spent decades working in film and television, appearing in everything from Danny Kaye's The Court Jester to Robert Downey Sr.'s Putney Swope. Lidsville would turn out to be one of the troupe's final major projects together before they disbanded in 1978, making it a unique piece of entertainment history that connected the golden age of Hollywood to the psychedelic Saturday morning programming of the early 70s. Fact 8. Opening filmed at Six Flags Over Texas. Unlike many television shows that rely entirely on studio sound stages and backlots, Lidsville made the unusual choice to film its opening sequence at an actual amusement park to give the show's beginning a sense of real-world normalcy before plunging into fantasy. The scenes showing Mark attending the magic show by Merlot the Magician, which serve as the setup for how he falls into the magician's hat and discovers Lidsville, were all shot on location at Six Flags Over Texas, the theme park located in Arlington between Dallas and Fort Worth. The production crew descended on the park on September 11, 1971, the same day the show premiered on ABC, capturing footage of the park's attractions and crowds to establish that Mark was just a normal teenager enjoying a normal day at an amusement park before his life took an incredibly bizarre turn. After these real-world opening scenes were filmed in Texas, the production moved to Paramount Pictures Film Studios in Los Angeles, where all the elaborate hat-shaped sets, Hoodoo's villainous lair, and the rest of Lidsville were constructed on sound stages. The contrast between the genuine Texas amusement park footage and the HUD, artificial, colorful, deliberately surreal world of talking hats helped emphasize just how far Mark had fallen from reality when he tumbled into that magician's hat and found himself trapped in a dimension that operated by completely different rules. Fact 9. Marilyn Manson sampled the show. Decades after Lidsville left the airwaves, the bizarre children's show found an unexpected second life in the world of industrial rock music. Shock rocker Marilyn Manson, known for incorporating samples from vintage films and television into his music, became fascinated with the show's psychedelic weirdness and decided to use it as source material for one of his songs. On the band's 1994 debut album, Portrait of an American Family, the song Dope Hat features multiple audio samples of Charles Nelson Reilly's voice as the villainous Hoodoo lifted directly from Lidsville episodes. The samples include Hoodoo's theatrical declarations like "The Great Hoodoo" and his menacing threat, "Prepare to meet your doom," which appear at various points throughout the track. The song's title itself plays on the same drug slang that gave Lidsville its controversial name, with Dope Hat referencing both the marijuana connection and the imagery of hats throughout Manson's work. The music video for the song drew heavily from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but the Lidsville samples remained a core part of the audio, introducing a whole new generation to the weirdness of the Croft brothers' creation. For many younger fans who discovered Marilyn Manson in the 90s, the Dope Hat samples became their first exposure to Lidsville, leading them to seek out the original show and discover just how genuinely strange 1970s children's programming could be. Fact 10. Butch Patrick was 18 playing a teenager. The casting of Butch Patrick as Mark created an unintentionally absurd situation that becomes more obvious when you watch the show with knowledge of his actual age. Patrick, who had become famous as a child playing Eddie Munster on The Munsters from 1964 to 1966, was brought on board Lidsville to play a teenage boy who falls into a magical hat and must navigate this strange new world. The problem was that by the time filming began in 1971, Patrick was 18 years old and fully grown, though he was meant to be portraying a much younger teenager. This age discrepancy becomes especially apparent during scenes where Mark is supposedly threatened or bullied by the various hat villains, who are literally hat-sized and much smaller than him. The image of an adult-sized Butch Patrick being menaced by tiny costume characters he could easily punt across the set creates an unintentional comedy that undermines any sense of real danger. There are multiple scenes where the bad hats capture Mark and push him around, and viewers can't help but notice that this full-grown man could destroy these felt and fabric. creatures before they finished their first sentence. The disconnect between Patrick's obvious physical maturity and his character's supposed vulnerability to these miniature antagonists adds another layer of surrealism to a show that was already operating at maximum weirdness, though probably not in the way the producers intended. Fact 11. Network demanded absurd safety notes. Television network executives in the early 1970s were notoriously concerned about setting bad examples for young viewers, even when those concerns ventured into completely illogical territory. During the production of Lidsville, ABC executives reviewing footage of the show sent back a note to the Crofts that perfectly captured this kind of nonsensical worry about children's programming. One of the show's good hat characters was Mother Wheels, an elderly grandmother character who happened to be a motorcycle helmet and was always shown riding around on her motorcycle in full leather gear while delivering her catchphrase, "Hiya, honeys." Network executives insisted that this character, who literally is a motorcycle helmet, as her entire body and being must be shown wearing an additional helmet while riding her motorcycle to demonstrate proper safety practices to young viewers. The fact that Mother Wheel's entire head and body was already a helmet apparently didn't matter to the concerned executives, who wanted to make absolutely sure children understood the importance of protective headgear. This is the same kind of thinking that would demand a character who was a life jacket wear another life jacket while swimming. The network note became one of many examples of the ridiculous demands and restrictions that producers had to deal with when creating children's programming during this era. Fact 12. Billy Hayes played a dual role. One of Lidsville's most memorable episodes brought back Billy Hayes' previous Croft character in a crossover that delighted fans of both shows. In the episode, Hayes played not only her regular role as Weenie the Genie, but also reprised her villainous character, Wilhelmina W. Witchy-Poo, from the Crofts' earlier hit, H.R. Pufnstoof. The plot involved Hoodoo using a Lonely Hearts Club to find a romantic companion, which somehow leads to him being matched with Witchy-Poo. After a rocky first meeting, the two evil magicians discover they have a lot in common, particularly their shared love of tormenting good-natured characters and causing chaos. They bond over their mutual enjoyment of zapping innocent victims with magic bolts and begin what the show presents as a genuine romance between villains. Mark, naturally horrified that the two bad guys might team up permanently, disguises himself as Mae West to crash their date and cause a rift between them. The episode features Hayes performing double duty, switching back and forth between her two distinct characters with their completely different voices, mannerisms, and personalities. What makes it even more surreal is that there's also a scene where a cheap-looking H.R. Pufnstoof costume appears as well, though it's clearly a hastily made version rather than the original costume from the first show, and Pufnstoof is noticeably shorter than he was in his own series, likely because a different performer was wearing the suit. Fact 13. Costume budget disaster. When Sid Croft came up with the concept for Lidsville after looking at his large personal hat collection and imagining what would happen if all those hats came to life with unique personalities, he didn't fully think through the financial implications of his creative vision. The Croft brothers had developed a cost-effective approach to production on their previous shows by recycling costumes and props between different series and even using outfits they had created for theme park productions. However, Lidsville's entire premise revolved around a world populated by living hats of every conceivable variety, from cowboy hats to chef's toques to motorcycle helmets to beanie caps with propellers. Because the show required such specific and unique hat-based character designs, the producers couldn't reuse or repurpose any existing costumes from their warehouse of materials. Every single hat character needed to be designed and constructed from scratch specifically for this show, which meant hiring costume designers, buying raw materials, and spending countless hours on fabrication for dozens and dozens of characters. This unexpected expense ate through a significant portion of the production budget that the Crofts had assumed would be available for other aspects of the show. The costume crisis became one of several factors that made Lidsville their most ambitious and expensive project up to that point, though not necessarily in a good way. Combined with the compressed filming schedule and other production challenges, The costume budget disaster contributed to the overall chaos and stress that defined the Lidsville experience for everyone involved. Fact 14. Actors constantly swapped costumes. The massive number of hat characters populating Lidsville created a logistical nightmare for the production team, trying to film scenes with numerous characters while keeping costs under control. The Croft brothers had already hired a core group of performers from previous shows who knew how to work in costume, but the sheer volume of different characters appearing in various scenes meant they needed additional help. They brought in about 20 members of the Hermine's Midgets troupe to handle background characters, and they even recruited children to wear some of the smaller costumes when needed. However, this still wasn't enough coverage for every scene, so the producers implemented a chaotic system where performers would play multiple characters by rapidly changing costumes. When the camera focus shifted from one character to another between shots, actors would frantically trade costumes backstage so they could appear as different characters in the next setup. This meant that over the course of filming 17 episodes, individual performers ended up playing numerous different hat residents, sometimes switching between being a good hat and a bad hat, depending on what the script required and which costume was available. The constant costume changes created additional stress for the actors, who had to not only remember their lines and blocking, but also keep track of which character they were supposed to be at any given moment. The whole system was a necessary compromise to make the ambitious show possible within budget constraints, but it added yet another layer of difficulty to an already challenging production. Fact 15. Reilly's performance became his legacy. Charles Nelson Reilly enjoyed a remarkable career that spanned decades and included major accomplishments that most actors would be thrilled to achieve as their legacy. He earned Tony Award nominations for his performances in the original Broadway productions of Bye Bye Birdie and Hello Dolly, where he created the role of Cornelius Hackle and demonstrated his considerable talents as a musical theater performer. He became a television fixture through countless appearances on talk shows and game shows, particularly his legendary run as a panelist on Match Game, where his quick wit and flamboyant personality made him a fan favorite. He worked steadily in film and television for years, building a diverse body of work that showcased his range as a character actor and comedian. Despite all these achievements, Reilly found himself frustrated and dismayed by what happened as he got older and met people in public. Rather than recognizing him for his Broadway credits or his game show appearances, the vast majority of people who approached him only wanted to talk about Lidsville and his role as the green-faced villain Hoodoo. The character he had suffered through playing, hating every minute in that sweltering costume and suffocating makeup, became the thing he was most famous for, and the role that defined him in the public imagination. For an actor who had worked so hard to establish himself as a serious theatrical performer, having his legacy reduced to a trippy children's show he despised was deeply disappointing, though he handled it with the same grace and humor he brought to everything else in his career.